My son called it a financial wellness checkup. That phrase should have made me laugh. After 38 years running my own plumbing business, I knew what my finances looked like. I didn't need a checkup. But he said it with such sincerity, such concern in his voice, that I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself he was just being a good son. I was 67 years old and I had been wrong about people before. I just hadn't expected to be wrong about him. His name is Kevin, my only son. After his mother passed, Helen, 3 years ago now, pancreatic cancer, gone in 4 months from diagnosis, Kevin started calling more, visiting more. He'd drive up from Columbus on weekends sometimes, help me with yard work, sit on the porch and drink coffee the way Helen and I used to. I thought grief had changed him, softened. He and I were never especially close when he was younger. He was more his mother's child, but after we lost her, I thought we were finally building something real. I should have paid more attention to when the visits started changing. It was subtle. Around 8 months ago, Kevin stopped just dropping by and started bringing his wife, Tara. Now, I want to be fair. Tara has always been polite to me. Polite the way a hotel front desk clerk is polite. Efficient. Measured. She'd refill my coffee without being asked and then immediately start talking about property values in my neighborhood. I have 4 acres outside of Dayton, Ohio. The house itself isn't much, but the land is worth something. Helen's garden takes up nearly a full acre on the east side. She planted it over 20 years, added to it every spring. Perennials, mostly. Things that come back. I noticed Tara looked at that garden the way some people look at empty space waiting to be filled. But I told myself I was being unfair. She was my son's wife. She was family. The financial wellness checkup was Kevin's idea, but Tara is the one who made the appointment. She told me over the phone that she'd found this wonderful firm, Meridian Planning Associates, she called it, that specialized in estate optimization for seniors. Those were her exact words. Estate optimization for seniors. I wrote them down on the notepad by my kitchen phone because something about the phrase nagged at me and I wanted to look at it later. I didn't look at it that night. I should have. The morning of the appointment, Kevin pulled up in his Jeep at 9:15. Tara was in the passenger seat. I came out in my good jacket, the gray one Helen bought me for our 40th anniversary dinner, and Kevin smiled when he saw me. A big, warm smile. That smile used to make me feel proud. That morning it made me feel like I was being managed. The drive to Meridian was about 25 minutes. Kevin talked the whole way. He talked about the market, about how smart it was to get organized now while I was healthy and sharp, about how Mom would have wanted me to have peace of mind. He mentioned Helen 3 times in 25 minutes, and each time my chest tightened just slightly. Not from grief, from something else I couldn't name yet. Meridian Planning Associates was in a converted Victorian house on the east side of Dayton. Nice neighborhood, dark wood trim inside, leather chairs, the kind of place designed to make you feel that your money was in serious, trustworthy hands. The receptionist was a young woman, mid-30s maybe, with her hair pulled back and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Professional, calm. Kevin gave his name at the desk. The receptionist, her name tag said Audrey, pulled up something on her computer, and then looked at me directly. There was a half-second pause. Just long enough to notice. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "could I ask you to step over here for just a moment? I need to verify some contact information before we get started." Kevin was already looking at a framed print on the wall. Tara was checking her phone. Neither of them registered anything unusual about Audrey's request. I followed her to a small alcove near the hallway leading to the back offices. She leaned close. Her voice dropped so low I had to concentrate to hear it. "Sir, I need you to listen to me. The paperwork they've brought in for you to sign today, it's not what you think it is. It's a durable power of attorney with an accelerated property transfer clause. Once you sign it, your son will have full legal authority to sell your property without your consent. I've seen this before." She paused. "Please don't let them know I said anything. Just don't sign anything today. Find a reason to leave." I looked at her. My heart was doing something strange, not racing, more like it had dropped into a lower gear, everything suddenly slower and clearer. "How do you know this?" I said. "Because I typed the documents," she said quietly, "and because I have a father too." Kevin called my name from across the lobby. Cheerful. Easy. "Dad, they're ready for us." I turned and looked at my son. He was smiling. Tara was tucking her phone into her purse with the focused efficiency she brought to everything. I said I needed to use the restroom first. Kevin pointed me toward the hallway. I walked down it, past the restroom, past a closed conference room door, and straight out through a fire exit at the end of the hall. The alarm didn't sound. The door opened onto a small parking lot behind the building. I walked around to the front, got into my own truck. I had driven myself there. I'd told Kevin I would meet them in case I needed to leave early for a hardware delivery, a lie I was grateful I'd thought to tell, and I drove home. My hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised me. I felt something cold and clear moving through me, the way cold air moves through an open window in November. I called my neighbor Walt from the driveway. Walt is 71, retired Army, and one of the most practically intelligent men I have ever known. He came over within 10 minutes. I told him everything. He sat at my kitchen table and listened without interrupting, which is a rare thing. When I finished, he said, "You need to call an attorney. Today. Not tomorrow. I already had someone in mind." Patricia Chen had handled Helen's estate. No, wait. I'll name her as she is. My attorney's name is Susan Park. She has handled my affairs since Helen passed. I called her office and her paralegal put me through within 20 minutes. I explained what had happened. Susan asked me 3 questions, concise and precise. Then she said, "Don't discuss this with your son until I've reviewed your existing documents. Can you come in this afternoon?" I said yes. What Susan found, when she pulled up my estate documents, was that someone had already made one attempt to change things. 8 months ago, right around the time Kevin's visits started intensifying. A change of address request had been submitted on my behalf to 2 financial institutions, redirecting my account statements to Kevin's Columbus address. The requests had been flagged by one of the banks and never processed. The other bank had complied. I sat in Susan's office and looked at that information and thought about 8 months of weekend visits, 8 months of yard work and coffee on the porch, 8 months of my son sitting across from me and talking about his mother while quietly redirecting my bank statements to his address. Helen used to say that grief changes people. She meant it as a kindness. She believed in people the way some people believe in weather. You couldn't argue with it. You just watched it come. I wish she'd been wrong more often. Susan filed a fraud alert with both financial institutions that same afternoon. She also contacted Meridian Planning Associates and sent a formal letter of representation, which put them on notice that I had legal counsel and would not be signing any documents without her review. Audrey, I didn't know her last name, I still don't, had already left the building by then. I later found out she had resigned that afternoon. The firm sent Kevin a different kind of message, that the appointment had been canceled due to a conflict of interest with an existing client. Kevin called me at 7 that evening. His voice had a different quality to it now. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was something thin and tightly controlled. "Dad, what happened today?" "Tara and I waited for over an hour. I wasn't feeling well," I said. "I left. You could have called, I know. I apologize for that." There was a silence. "Then we should reschedule, Susan." He caught himself. He almost said a name, a different name, someone he'd apparently already been speaking to about my affairs. "We can talk about it later," I said. "I need to get to bed." I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a long time. The house was quiet the way it gets quiet when you notice it. Not peaceful, just still. The clock over the stove ticked. Outside, Helen's garden was dark, just shapes in the evening light. I could see the outline of the rose arbor she built with her own hands in 2009, the year we almost lost the business, and she said we needed something beautiful to look at. She was right. She was almost always right. I went out there and stood in it for a while. The air smelled like damp soil and late summer sage. Kevin came by 3 days later, alone. Tara stayed in Columbus. He stood in my driveway and he didn't look like my son in that moment. He looked like someone who had prepared a version of himself to deliver, and now wasn't sure the delivery was going to work. "I need to explain something," he started. "You redirected my bank statements," I said. He went quiet. "You made an appointment with a firm that prepared documents designed to give you control of my property without my knowledge or consent." I kept my voice even. I had practiced this. Not the words, the evenness. "I want to know how long this has been planned." He sat down on my porch steps. He sat down like the air went out of him. What came out over the next hour was something I have turned over many times since and still don't fully understand. Kevin and Tara had debt, more than I knew, far more than they'd let on. They'd bought a house in Columbus at the peak of the market, financed home improvements on a HELOC, and Tara's business, she runs an interior design studio, had contracted sharply during the past 2 years. They were not bankrupt, but they were frightened, and frightened people, I have learned, sometimes choose to be cowardly in ways that look, at first glance, like practicality. Kevin told me he never intended to sell the property without telling me that the power of attorney was just a precaution in case I became incapacitated, that Tara had found the firm and the documents were standard. I listened to all of it. I let him say everything he needed to say. Then I said, Kevin, I'm 67 years old. I ran a business for 38 years. I raised you in this house. I sat with your mother every day for 4 months while she died, and I did not fall apart. I am not incapacitated, and I am not naive. He didn't say anything. You knew I wouldn't agree if you asked me directly, so you didn't ask. You spent 8 months building access so that you wouldn't need to. He looked at the porch boards. I'm sorry, Dad. I believed the sorrow. I want to be honest about that. I believed it was real. What I no longer believed was that it was the whole story, or that it changed what had been done. Sorrow after the fact is not the same as choosing differently. Helen taught me that too, about her own brother. Years ago, she said, watch what people do before they're caught, not after. The legal process moved quietly over the next few weeks. Susan sent formal documentation to Kevin and Tara, outlining the fraudulent redirection of financial records and the nature of the documents that had been prepared at Meridian. Meridian itself turned out to be under investigation already. Not for the first time, Susan said, for predatory estate planning targeting elderly clients. Audrey had apparently not been the first employee to have concerns. Kevin and Tara did not face criminal charges. Susan made it clear that path was available to me. I thought about it for 3 days. I walked Helen's garden in the evenings, and I thought about what kind of ending I wanted this to have. I chose not to pursue charges. That decision belongs to me, and I don't need anyone else to agree with it. What I did require, through Susan's office, was a formal signed acknowledgement from Kevin that no further estate-related actions would be taken without my direct written consent and independent legal review. He signed it. He has not called since. It has been 11 weeks. I don't know what that silence means yet. Whether it's shame or strategy or something in between, I have stopped trying to interpret it. Some questions, I've learned, don't resolve cleanly. They just sit there with you like an old injury that forecasts rain. What I know is this. I am still in my house. The 4 acres are still mine. Helen's garden came through the summer better than it has in years. The coneflowers went 3 feet tall, which she would have loved. She always said coneflowers were the most honest plants in any garden. They came back without being coaxed. I repainted the porch railing last month. It needed it. The gray paint matched the wood exactly after it dried, and I stood back and looked at it in the late afternoon light and thought about all the things in a life that hold simply because you keep tending to them. Walt came over for coffee last Saturday. We sat on that freshly painted porch, and he asked me how I was doing, really doing, and I told him the truth. I'm fine, not the fine that means nothing. The kind that means I'm still standing in my own house on my own land, and I know exactly who I am. There's a cardinal that comes to the feeder Helen hung outside the kitchen window. Has come every morning since before she died. I don't know if it's the same bird. I don't know how long cardinals live. But every morning I make my coffee, and I look out that window and it's there. And I say what I always say. Good morning, Helen. I think she would understand everything I chose to do. More than that, I think she'd say I waited longer than she would have. She was almost always right about that kind of thing, too.